So I'm going to invite Shazia and Paul from Redbridge Council to join me in a brief discussion about the work that they've been doing, and primarily to set the scene before going into the sort of main slides presentation. So Shazia, Paul, do you want to introduce yourselves and then maybe give us a bit of a background?
Happy to kick off. So I'm Shazia. I'm the Senior Communications and Engagement Officer in the Community Hubs team. And the Community Hubs team sits within the Strategy Directorate at the London Borough of Redbridge. And I will hand over to Paul.
Paul Perkins. Lovely to see a good few faces actually I've seen before. And nice to see you as well, Jenny.
Hello.
And I'm Community Hubs Programme Director at Redbridge, so I work in the same team as Shazia. And Shazia, are you going to kind of kick us off, or do you want me to say a few words? What would be most helpful?
I think it might be quite nice if you maybe give some background, and then I'll take over from maybe the sort of practicalities of how we kicked off with the new approach.
Great. And also, fortuitously, it's lovely that Rachel from Bjertalk has joined us, who was involved in helping us develop this approach, and would you believe, was also paired up with me in the breakout. So it was meant to be. So yeah, I'll just say a little bit. I mean, my background, without going back too far, I was chief executive of charity in Camden, small charity working with children and young people. I then spent a couple of years at Save the Children before coming to Redbridge. And one of the things that was really interesting to me over that period, and I spent actually quite a bit of time with Toby Lowe and with Collaborate, and was sort of following with great interest and support the whole human learning systems approach and field, was this idea of, how to kind of best lead, how to best support teams. And my experiences actually at Save the Children were super hierarchical, very kind of hierarchical organisation, very top-down culture, decision-making. And so when I came to Redbridge, I think one of the things I was really interested in, was kind of this hypothesis that, if we kind of create the right conditions and sort of build the right culture and have clarity still about what we want to achieve and how we're going to achieve it, that can end up being a much more productive and effective and satisfying work environment. And when I say productive and effective and satisfying, I kind of think there are sort of metrics almost that sit within them. So, a satisfying work environment is one that people love coming to work in. It's also a place that people leave less frequently. But actually, an effective work environment is one that still gets the job done, still works, to task and delivers. And I was particularly, I suppose, convinced by the sort of recognition that sort of the current model of management, or the typical model of management that we kind of see across society, is very kind of based on sort of industrial revolution logic of, we have simple jobs that before us, the people who became our managers did. And so actually, traditionally, managers know exactly what their reports are supposed to do, and they can tell them how to do it or advise them if they make mistakes, or, they know what targets should be set, they know what's reasonable. And actually, what I think is really compelling about the human learning systems insight is that we are working in much more complex environments, where there's nothing to say that just because I happen to be in a more senior position that I'm going to have a better understanding of what someone else needs to be delivering. And so what does leadership and support look like in that context? Also questions actually about equity and treatment, because not everybody is a manager in a kind of structural or in a salaried sense. And so, yeah, I suppose just at a very basic level, it felt like at Redbridge there was an opportunity to kind of do a bit of an experiment and say, what happens if we try and set up this team in a way which is less top down? And I say less because we can't, and we don't deny that we're part of a hierarchical organisation, but kind of seeks to build a much more kind of self-managing approach. I mean, I think it's been, I mean, I love working with this team, and I'm sure that the kind of self-management is a big part of what's made that satisfying. But I will stop there and hand over to you, Shazia.
Thank you. It's really thorough background and context piece. So there's not a huge amount to add. The only other bits
one thing actually, Shazia, that I'd like to invite you to explore a little bit or set the scene around is the actual work that your team does, and how organising in this way helps you deliver what you want to deliver.
Yeah, so yeah, that was the only thing that I thought was probably missing, was just the work that the Community Hubs team is doing is building and creating some community hubs across the borough, but doing that with the local people and residents. And so that sort of power sharing and that collaboration is really central to the ethos of the team and the programme. And so this is also why it sort of made sense to use this approach, because it's a very empowering and power sharing approach. So it seemed really aligned to what we were trying to achieve in our borough and with local residents, and we could sort of feed that through and sort of live some of that in our sort of day-to-day sort of team life. It's incredibly empowering. And it was interesting actually when we did our intro chat earlier, someone talked about innovation and actually kind of hierarchy sort of stifling elements of innovation. And actually when you have a more empowered team, they are much more likely to innovate and often go above and beyond. You know, it's not the type of ethos that everyone sort of clocks in at 9 and clocks out at 5 and just thinks, oh no, you know, that's done. You actually get a huge amount of dedication. It really helps with staff retention, as Paul mentioned, and a really sort of empowered team that is really driven by a vision and goal.
Lovely, thanks, Shazia. Perhaps now is a good time to jump straight into the presentation.
Great, thanks, Jenny. So Arga is going to share the slides. So I'll just briefly talk about some of the benefits of self-management. So why, I sort of started this conversation already. So why would you want to try self-management? If you could just move to the second slide, Arga. Brilliant, thank you. So the benefits of self-management, and we'll talk about sort of self-management and shared leadership sort of interchangeably, so they are very similar. And so what we find with that is that there is an increased sense of autonomy, so an ability to sort of own your area of work and sort of move forward with that. It's an incredibly empowering approach, as I mentioned. You find that there is increased developmental opportunities. So actually kind of in a traditional hierarchy, you may not be allowed, or kind of it might not be assumed that you would do particular things, but actually in the self-managing team, there is a lot more sort of equity and equality around trying new things that you might want to develop in. Improved job satisfaction and improved learning through self-development. As we mentioned, space for innovation and better communication between the team. The Community Hubs team started at quite a unique period of history. We started during the lockdown, during the COVID pandemic. So actually, if we had sort of started in a very sort of hierarchical, traditional structure, you know, what you would have often found is that, you know, you might be speaking very frequently with your line manager, but actually that communication across the team might not be as much. So actually we found with a sort of self-managing team, there is really strong and better communication across the team. I'll now hand over to my colleague, Ed.
Thank you. So I'm just going to say a few few things about the process that we went through, and really pleased that Rachel from Buurtzorg UK is here with us, because she was there right at the beginning of this journey that we went on. So I won't say too much and speak too much for her. Rachel, do chip in if you like to add anything. But Buurtzorg is a social care organisation based in the Netherlands, and they shared some of the foundations of their approach and what they've developed with us, which led to us developing what's called a team framework, and then a team agreement, which describes firstly the what and then the how of what the team does. We developed that, and that became the sort of heart of a much fuller, more detailed team manual, which describes all of our different processes and forms and ways that we do things, the way that we worked with each other. And that manual itself was a process of development, and we had regular reviews and reflected on what worked and where we could improve. And overall, that's the the theme, the cycle here on the slide, of relying on feedback, reflecting on that feedback, learning together, and then improving areas that we've identified either individually within small teams or as a whole team. That's sort of at the heart of the approach that we developed, and very much in keeping with going back to Buurtzorg. If we can go to the next slide, what Buurtzorg put together within the Netherlands. So they've developed an approach where, as a social care delivery organisation, they have small self-managing teams, usually of around 6 people, if I remember correctly, where they have a really high degree of autonomy on all of the day-to-day matters of managing timetables, schedules, and but also how they I'm glad to see I can see in the chat that I'm on the right lines. Thank you, Rachel. So also managing budgets and innovation, crucially coming up with new different ways of delivering the best support and service possible to the people and communities that they served. And they found an incredibly effective and efficient way of managing resources and delivering really high quality services. So inspired by that, and the approach that they developed, moving to the next slide, the first aspect of this is a team framework. So we developed this framework for our team in a very collaborative way. So the whole team across all roles was involved in contributing to developing a description, a very detailed description of what we're working together to achieve. So in our case, this involved 2 principal sections. Firstly, a set of commitments to the partners, residents, and other collaborators that we're working with, and within that, setting out how we wish to communicate our responsibilities to them and our accountabilities to others. And then within the team, setting out in detail our own roles and responsibilities in relation to each other. So as outlined in our job descriptions, yes, that's the starting point, but we wanted to build out and have additional detail agreed and discussed between us, thinking about collaboration being a key part. Early on, we identified that as something which is fundamental, and within that, sharing skills and appreciating the contributions of others and making that explicit. And lastly, using the tree model for decision making, which is something which Buurtzorg shared with us, and Argo will say a little bit more about that later on in the presentation. So that's what we set out to achieve. And then I think the soul of the whole process for us was the agreement, the team agreement, which describes how we work together. And again, through a very collaborative process, we came up with 3 key principles, operating principles for everything that we do. And in our case, our guiding principles was to work with respect, awareness, and generosity in everything that we do. And we built out these principles with very specific examples in order to bring that to life. So the one that always comes to mind is a very kind of practical one, but it's in relation to booking annual leave. It's something which we can do with respect, with awareness and generosity, by considering the impact of when and how you take leave on the rest of the team, on your colleagues. And it's a very sort of tangible example, I find, that then can be translated into in all areas of how we interact and connect with each other in the course of doing our work. So move on. I believe I am handing over to Arga.
Thank you, Ed. Certainly. So with this theory out the way, let's now look at how our self-management looks like in practice. We'll first look at the rotating and lead roles. So in a nutshell, both roles are responsibilities everyone in a team takes on as part of their job and are designed to enable everyone to be included in everything that we do, but also opportunity to learn and develop. So our rotating roles, we take those roles individually. Those are different responsibilities, which we kind of take on as agreed by our rota. And depending on these roles, they can sort of rotate monthly, weekly, and I'll just kind of mention a couple of those here. So some of those roles are as part of our weekly team meeting, and we have a chair, minute taker, and a timekeeper that rotates on a weekly basis. So every week we have someone else chairing the session, someone else making notes, etc., etc. We also have a couple of roles as a part of the information management, ensuring that our data is well ordered and maintained, and that kind of rotates monthly. We also sort of have somebody looking on our record keeping and compliance, so ensuring that we complete any mandatory training. We also, during the pandemic, started the team well-being sort of sessions, and that really helped us. And we had someone kind of rotate every 6 weeks, so kind of arranging the rota for us to have those conversations with each other. We also have the social committee, so for people who are organizing our sort of festive seasonal occasions, any events that we want to be part of, and our directorate stand-ups that we rotate every kind of 2 months. In terms of the lead roles, they are actually an additional responsibility which we have decided to take on as part of our main roles. And that's either in our area of expertise or area of interest. So whoever takes on the lead role acts as the first point of contact for that given initiative. And I kind of listed a couple of those there. And so it's that individual is responsible for building positive relationships with other colleagues and exploring how our program can support the specific area or that initiative. This individual also takes responsibility for the communication with that set team or that set initiative. And here it's important to mention that we've created those roles to enable us to better work with colleagues from other council departments, which kind of helps us coordinate our involvement and also support those specific areas. So the second thing we do is feedback. So our approach has been to encourage each other to ask for feedback, share learning and good practice, which in the context of the 3 key principles that Ed had mentioned, which is the respect, awareness and generosity, that is part of our team agreement. So when providing the individual feedback, and there is a form on the side, you can see on the side of the screen, sorry, we concentrate on 2 essential areas. Firstly, we assess what we have done. So that could be sort of context of recent activities. Maybe you run a meeting or a workshop or created any document or a plan that you've generated. So we kind of ask for feedback on that output. And then we also request a feedback on how we've done something. So really to reflect on our personal development, evaluate the tone of that conversation, communication style, how others perceived our work generally. So this is as I said, done via that feedback form, and we kind of share that every time we run any sort of events or have any conversations or just finish any project that we've been working on. So, and then to facilitate that feedback, we hold a monthly one-to-one meetings with our named managers, and during which we kind of reflect on that feedback we've received and sort of, you know, kind of unpack a little bit how other people felt about us and how do we feel about that feedback we've just received. And as a team, you know, as Shazia, Paul and Ed mentioned previously, we are committed to fostering that learning culture, and you know, we take that individual and collective responsibility on reflecting or learning and improving our work collectively as a team. So we do run team surveys where we kind of able to express what's working, what we want to improve on, and you know, and see how work with each other as a team. So that's how that feedback looks like for us. I'm going to move us on now to Del.
Unmute first. Hi, everybody. Yes, so following on from hearing about obviously the team framework and all the procedures in place, what does it all mean? So whilst the team framework plays a central and foundational role and helps us deliver the way we work, we have human contact as well, meaning a named manager, but not a line manager. So having healthy relationships with an experienced, supportive individual in any organization or any workplace is very key. So the key activities our named manager does is to hold monthly 60-minute one-to-one sessions. So the named manager supports discussions on making choices regarding personal development, career progression, and focusing on the reflection part, not the direction part. So when we have these conversations with the named managers, it's not a mechanism for task management, omission, or oversight. Other HR responsibilities required by the named manager could be related to feedback, performance, any formal procedures that needs to be managed in any organization. And lastly, the named manager ensures that the staff members have confidential, dedicated space which supports the well-being and job satisfaction, which Paul kind of mentioned at the beginning, our team has quite high regards on. Thank you. Next slide, please, Aga. Reflection was another key thing that we always need to feed into. So there's a quote here I'd like to read out. So we do not learn from experience, we learn from reflecting on experience. So I had a question for everybody. I'd just like everybody to think. So have you had a near miss or an accident recently? It could be anything. It could be hitting your elbow on a cabinet as you're walking past something. So by the way, just to let you know, I'm not calling out for any compensation, no win, no fee. So don't panic, all right? The reason I ask is if you have reflected on how the near miss or accident could have been avoided by yourself. And if the answer is yes, then you have actually successfully reflected. So reflection is actually quite an easy process to do. The challenge is to apply the same thinking as if you had a near miss, but changes to your own personal development should allow you to plan in time for reflection, right? So I hope you're with me still. So how do you learn from experience is a key life skill that we do not always use in everyday life, as time can be challenging for everyone. So there are many different models, guys, to reflect. Might be sounding mad, but if you talk to the mirror, if you talk to yourself, what went well, what didn't go well, is actually reflecting on yourself. So what do we do in the Hubs team? So in order to provide a planned space in which colleagues can reflect on and with regards to how they're working, celebrate success, explore what they would like to change, a member of the Hubs team is responsible for scheduling and facilitating a reflective practice session. This then becomes a commitment and an anchor to allow reflection time. Okay, so the output of this is continuous reflection allows you to improve with self-development and as a person. So the power of reflection is very, very important, guys. So over to Aga now. Thank you.
Thank you, Del. And so now we will look at our decision tree and how do we make decision, given that we don't have a line manager to tell us exactly what to do. So our framework sets out that we use the tree model for decision making and taking any actions. So the primary objective of our approach is to enable each of us to make decisions and act on them with confidence and freedom, supported by input from colleagues where required, and that all depends on which sort of level of decisions we are making. So in our case, the model identifies 4 types of decisions: leaf, branch, root, and a trunk. And each type identifies who should be included in making particular decision, who need to know about the decision, and who need to be told about the decision. As self-managed team, our aim is to for everybody in a team to be able to make decisions and act on them with as much freedom as possible. So just looking at some of those decisions, leaf decisions and branch decisions are sort of a smaller decision where we can kind of act independently. That could be, for example, me as a data analyst choosing which software I'm going to use to analyze data, because that's only I can make that decision. I don't think, anybody else could make that decision. But a branch decision would be, still made independently, but there will be some other people who might be affected by that decision, which you'll have to let them know about that. And the root decisions and the track decisions, there are more kind of overall team decisions. If we change a timeline in our plan, that will affect us all, and so we all need to be kind of part of that. And agree that together. Same with the root decisions, but that's probably even larger than the team, maybe even a wider organization that will be affected by that decision. So yeah, those are the kind of four level of decisions which we make, and that enables us to kind of be independent and kind of have that confidence to work in the way we work. Right, so that's, I think, the end, and we'll now pass you on back to Ed, who will...
I will encourage you to think about giving this a go. Some of you may already be using some aspects of the approach we've discussed in your own work context, but if not, we wanted to offer up 3 aspects of what we've been talking about for discussion. So we're going to go into breakout groups shortly, and what we would like you to consider is taking these 3 different aspects of our approach. Firstly, first question, which one of these might you like to have a try at in your own team, your own context? And secondly, what might get in the way? So I'm going to repeat those questions after I've just recapped what each of these 3 options and approaches are. So they're arranged. So at the top, we've got something which is hopefully quite light touch, and then further down, something a little bit higher touch. So firstly, Aga talked about rotating roles. So this is sharing responsibilities that might traditionally be focused on the more senior roles within a team and sharing them across equally. So within the context of a team meeting, having a rotating chair. So each week or every fortnight or month, however often your team has a meeting, across all members of the team, everyone gets a chance to chair the meeting. So hopefully that's a fairly sort of accessible starting point to working in a less hierarchical way. Secondly, taking named management as an approach and an opportunity to support reflection, not direction. So rather than a line manager in a more traditional context being seen as the source of direction and telling reports what they should be doing and what they should not be doing, reframing that role as supporting reflection on feedback which is gathered by each member of the team. So you are supporting the individual to make more autonomous decisions based on reflection and reflecting on feedback that they take from other members and colleagues of the team that they're working with. And so lastly, maybe the slightly higher touch, higher commitment, but we think higher reward aspect of our approach is dedicated time for regular reflective practice. So when we say regular, in our case, we're a team of 16. We break down into smaller teams, and every 8 weeks we have a 90-minute session, which is facilitated well, by me in this case. And the purpose of the session is purely to reflect on the work that's been happening in the past 2 months, to decide what themes or topics are most important to discuss, and then crucially, out of that reflective discussion, to agree on some actions that we would like to take either individually or as a small group in order to improve and refine our work. So rotating roles, named management, or reflective practice. Those are 3 options. And in your small groups, if you could discuss 2 questions. Firstly, which of these 3 might you like to have a try at within your own team? And secondly, what might get in the way? So I think there is a button that's about to be pressed.
Yeah, I'm gonna open them all up and a little pop-up box should show. And then you just click join. So let's try.
We're also going to try and send someone from Redbridge to each of the groups as much as possible. And we're going to ask you to play back the kind of main things that you've heard very briefly, obviously in the main group. So please take notes.
Brilliant.
Hey, so where should we go?
So
Hello.
Room 2 doesn't have a Redbridge person. Or 3, so some of us should go in those.
Do you want to go to room
2?
Can you assign yourselves just through the button?
Yeah,
Yeah,
I can.
we can.
Yeah.
So why don't you jump into any groups that aren't
I'm going to go to room
Person.
6.
Okay. I'll go
See
room
ya.
You've got
I'll go
15
room
minutes.
3.
Darcy, you'll go to room 3.
3, yeah.
Mrs.
Paul's
Chess,
gone to room 6.
Sorry, it's Valeria here. Sorry, I was just slightly off screen. I was just I had someone at the door. I hope I haven't left someone on their own.
No, sorry, I should explain. Valeria is part of the Redbridge crew as well. Valeria, can you see the room list?
Yes, sec. Where am I looking at? Breakout rooms. Yeah, it says that I have to join room 6.
I think Paul's just gone there, so maybe I can put you in room 5.
Whatever works for you. Sorry about that.
It's just so that we've got a Redbridge person in the group.
Okay.
I know that there's quite a lot of nuts and bolts questions coming up in the chat.
Okay.
Yeah, that happened yesterday as well.
How does it work? Who's paying?
Oh gosh. Okay. So we are talking, yeah, I'm just rereading the questions. We're talking about which ones you might try out, yeah?
Yep.
Yeah, so if you go into room...
Okay, I'm joining 5. Thank you, Emma.
No worries.
Room 4 looks quite slight.
Yeah, there's 2 Redbridge folk in there already. That was my I've done that calculation as well. I thought
okay.
I might hover here if that's
yeah, in case people come.
So one of the things that came up yesterday, which was a helpful cat amongst the pigeons was the implication or characterizing this as senior people asking more junior people to do stuff that more senior people get paid more to do.
What kind of specific things?
Well, so taking on more responsibility for deciding what to do on a day-to-day basis at the most general level, rather than following instructions. I mean, which is so sort of, well, I don't know, for me, it reveals so much in itself, right? Perceiving that as a burden rather than an opportunity. And I suppose it's all about context, and kind of speaks from people's frame of reference. I suppose that's the power of the feedback, saying, what does this tell us about what people's sort of psychological relationship with autonomy versus authority?
What kind of people are asking the question? Like,
so it was an interesting group, because I was reflecting with the others that probably would get. I'm imagining the conversations are going to be slightly different in this group, because everyone's chosen to take time out of their day to join this group, which is specifically themed around this broadly this kind of thing. And yesterday it's a sort of an internal network called the Lead Network, which I think people join for quite a wide variety of reasons. Amongst others, it's to sort of connect with, to build their own network, basically, with other colleagues, and make connections and become a bit more visible. So anyway, it's a long-winded way of saying there were some colleagues, so for example, joining from social care, social workers, who my colleague Dewara was in a breakout room with them, and afterwards she was like, right, well, that was tough. Yeah, so in that case, very much they were receiving this approach from a viewpoint of, well, why would I want to do this? This is just more work that I'd have to do on top of everything else I've got to do. I'm not paid to manage myself. I need to be managed.
It's interesting, isn't it? Because I wonder if they actually wonder if they appreciate the way they're managed now. So do they think it helps them?
Well, that's exactly the kind of debrief I had with Dilwara, saying that's interesting, and like if we had the time to sort of dig into that, like, do you like the way that you're managed now? Do you feel that you're held and directed in a consistent way? And
I wonder if it's like not so much about liking the way they're managed, but like in those jobs where like you're so stressed and anxious, having to think about how to like self-manage yourself, or it's almost adding to your stress, and like the fact of like someone cares about my progression and my development, so it's like one less thing,
or there's someone to blame if something goes wrong.
Yeah, exactly.
No, absolutely. I think the system is so, it sort of folds back into a related area, I think, in those kind of jobs where, in order to cope with the stress of not being able to do the job that you would wish to do as a human, you defer to the process. Like it's an archaic reference, but the clipboard comes up. It would be the iPad these days, or whatever. The list of things which we've decided is the job is all that I'm going to focus on, because that gives me safety of saying I've done the things that I've been asked to do by the system, and therefore I have done the job, even though in their heart they would know that I have not solved the issue and the struggle that I can see that this person is going through, and it it would just be heartbreaking day by day to go through that.
In your role, do you think, because presumably you're in a bit of a middle role between your self-managing team, but you're managed presumably up in a hierarchical way, or does Paul manage you?
Paul manages me, so I've had that air cover throughout the Redbridge.
Is your management relationship also, could you characterize it as self-managing?
Oh, very much so.
And then Paul, presumably his manager is someone even more senior.
Yeah, and yeah, it's very much not. I mean, I think one of the not so subtexts of our experience is you need someone in Paul's position level of seniority within a council to be prepared to just, you know, step out and absorb all of the other stuff and just go, yeah, this is how we're doing it. And you know, he has absolutely kind of covered the rest of us from a lot of stuff that would otherwise have been passed down through. You know, the pressure sort of gets handed out and down. I think that seems to be, you know, it's fairly typical of most organisations, but I think particularly so in some ways in local authorities, or certainly in this local authority. I know there were
I think, did you hear what I can't remember her name, but the woman from Cambridgeshire was saying just at the beginning in the pair discussion about how basically sounds like it's a really, really difficult place to work at the moment. Obviously Simon's there, so it's a bit weird, but she said that just about everyone in the chain of command above is new, and she's not. So she's getting on doing the work, but feels like she's the only one who really knows anything about the place and the work that's going on. And she's got lots of things that she'd like to, that she believes are actually things that other people should be doing, but she hasn't got anyone to give them to because she hasn't got any kind of, she hasn't had conversations with those people. She doesn't know who to take what to, and, you know, kind of, so like, it sounds like, so Cambridgeshire and, was it Cambridgeshire and Peterborough are divorcing? And
oh, right.
Yeah, so they've been together, I think, joint for, I mean, it can't be Cambridgeshire, it must be Cambridge. I don't know, anyway, but maybe there's two councils represented in this. But yeah, they've been operating together for the last 7 years and now they're separating.
Oh, right. Yeah, there would have been like, maybe there's a combined authority. So City, Cambridge City.
I think there is now.
Cambridge City might be combined and now they're separating, or
because Peterborough is in there, and so is Huntingdonshire. So Huntingdonshire is a district within Cambridgeshire, isn't it? Anyway, there's people from that system. I've seen the organisation names, so they're all kind of, they probably know each other, but I'm not sure.
Emma, do you have any experience of local authorities? Oh no, you said this is your first job. Is that right?
Yeah.
Yes, I remembered right. Okay. I'll flip the question. Given on what you've seen and heard, you know, what would you be curious about ever working for a local authority at some point after a long and flourishing stint to collaborate, obviously?
It's hard to say. I mean, I don't think I have like much exposure to them. I think the exposure I do have is normally with people who are like really passionate about it. So it doesn't seem all that bad, but at the same time, I'm just thinking about, you know, you were like, we were talking last time about things to implement. Like, I think it would be quite difficult for me to move from collaborate to like a really hierarchical, like imposed type place, because for example, like Jenny is my manager, and I don't know to the extent that
I'm really strict.
I couldn't see like Jenny being like, you need to do this and you need to do that and blah blah blah. Like, I would find that quite difficult. And I attended like another one of these sessions previously and like talking about, like, it was weird to me to hear a conversation not just talking about the pressures of like work, and you know, work can suck sometimes, but like it really feels like they take on the pressure of the place as well. So I think it would be like, it feels like it would be kind of restrictive, and also just I would like too much pressures coming from everywhere. Like the discussion I joined, Jenny, was about warm hubs, right? And I just felt so depressed like leaving it, because it was like they were being forced to like implement warm hubs, but like a lot of people were saying that they don't even like the idea of warm hubs. So yeah,
there wasn't really any evidence that there were that it was something that people wanted or needed.
Yeah.
The sort of political or PR driven approach to, oh yeah, this is a thing and they've got one, so we need to have one of those too, and let's have the initiative, and the initiative boils down to some slightly ham-fisted Teams calls and a web page that no one ever bothers updating.
Yeah, which as a response, I suppose, to something as grave as the cost of living crisis, where you could see people under real pressure and having to implement something that you didn't believe in, whilst seeing the circumstances some people living in. I think that was coming through quite clearly in that. It was, yeah, it was a tough conversation. And it's weird because obviously we're at like a step removed, so we're just watching it, but you can still feel the emotional sort of pull that's going on for people.
No, absolutely. I mean, I think there's, I mean, you know, it probably won't surprise well, certainly you, Jenny, and I think maybe you, Emma, as well, to know that I've sort of engaged in therapy of various forms, and you know, I increasingly over the years, as time goes by, I think that there's such a read across from the kind of investigation and work that you do personally in therapy and what goes on within work environments. You know, whatever kind of context. You know, if you're in a hyper commercial context, there's so much deep psychological stuff going on in how you compartmentalize. But within a local authority where you are trying explicitly to meet people's needs, and most of all and first meet the needs of the most vulnerable, you know, that opens up all sorts of stuff for people, which they may or may not be, you know, aware of or want to go into. And
Jenny and I talk about this like a lot, about how much you bring yourself to work and how much you feel comfortable bringing yourself to work. And I guess like maybe that's part of what you're getting at, is that I feel like in a job like that you have to bring yourself to work somewhat, because it's like people's lives. Like, why are you doing? Yeah. Oh.
These videos can be edited as required.
Well, speaking of which, I should probably bring everyone back now. Actually, I just realized the time.
I should have taken the opportunity to go for a wee as well.
Sorry.
You give them a minute. So.
Well, just in the last 30 seconds, I would suggest that whatever we think, we bring all of ourselves to work. That's
you can't avoid it.
But we bring all of it, whatever we believe ourselves to be doing. And there's
how much effort you put into hiding it.
Stuff gets displaced one way or another, depending on what you're trying to control for. That's what I reckon.
Awesome. Well, hopefully everyone had a good chat. Thank you.
Yeah. I forgot to tell you, Jenny, the Grace, the new intern, she also joined.
Oh, okay, cool.
So she was like shadowing, so hopefully that'll be interesting for her as well.
Yeah. Awesome. Oh, cold. So yeah, we're doing amazingly well for time. You timed your presentation brilliantly. Hi there, Kay. I've just finished working on a project with Kay, Ed. So
it's nice to see you, Jenny.
Thank you. Good to see you again. Right, everyone's back or on their way. Excellent. Well, hopefully you managed to have good chats in some way related to the questions. I know that sometimes these conversations can go anywhere and everywhere, and that you managed to grill whichever person from Redbridge you were lucky enough to have in your group. I saw that there were quite a lot of quite functional questions in the chat about how does this actually work, the kind of nuts and bolts of things. So hopefully you managed to answer some of those questions as well. And that's nice feedback from Claire as well. So we thought that now we could get some sense of what went on in those breakout rooms, recognising that obviously there's quite a few people here. So hopefully someone from each group is willing and able to just kind of give us some headlines of what you heard in those chats, what you might be taking away from it. So if we could ask you to do that very briefly. Who's going to volunteer first? Or do we need to pick on people?
I don't mind going first.
Excellent. Good on you.
Okay, hello everybody. Our main discussion points were around all three of the points mentioned in the triangle. So if we go to rotating roles, first of all, initially we mentioned that some of our roles are very specific, so it might be quite difficult to amend. So doing things like would usually fall on the junior person, which our Redbridge representative highlighted. It might be quite tricky to initiate. In terms of name management and the reflection, so the middle of the triangle, you mentioned that seeking feedback from lots of people might sort of be time consuming, and is there a true purpose to that? And then finally on the reflective practice, it was a really interesting one. It can be quite tricky if there's a rigid structure set in place, complicated to break down barriers, and time can be a factor as well. So kind of all over the shop there, really. Thank you.
Excellent. Thank you for sharing that. Is there who's willing to go next? I have no list or anything like that, so I am completely dependent on you popping up.
Happy to go next from our group. So brilliantly, most of our group members already do a lot of these aspects. So they all talked about already incorporating reflective practice in some sort. Actually, sort of even with the sort of name, with the sort of management approach, it seemed as if it was quite a named management approach, actually, that they were incorporating an element of reflection. We had varying sort of individuals in the team, so there was sort of social work where you might expect some of these aspects to be commonly used, but there was also NHS, sports, community work. So it was great to hear that actually there was already elements of rotating roles, reflection, not direction, sort of name management discussions, and reflective practice already embedded. And we've had some really lovely examples of types of questions used in sort of group supervision or action learning sets already going on. So yeah, it's really inspiring to hear that.
That sounds super useful. If anyone who is in that group is willing to share any of the questions or like common questions that you use in the chat, then please do share along. I personally would be interested in that as well. Okay, thank you very much, Shazia. Who's next?
I can go.
Yeah, please do.
So I just wanted to say, in our group, we had the rotating roles being used. However, they actually phased out and stopped being used. And that was because they didn't really have a structure set up. So we kind of shared what we do is literally, it's on a spreadsheet, weekly, monthly. And that simple step highlighted to them, that's all they needed to do. So creating a rotating role isn't hard as long as you get everybody's agreement at the beginning, put it on a piece of paper and let it run. And people find their own covers, and they took that feedback on really well, and they said they're going to really start that back. No pressure, by the way, to whoever mentioned that. Second one was the reflective. They really said that was quite a highlight, an eye-opener, that the importance of reflecting is really important, and to learn from what you've individually done yourself or learn from others and taking that forward is something they would really be pushing forward. That's all.
Great, thank you for that. Really heartening to hear. Yeah, that there's lots of opportunities to put these things in practice. Any more? I think we had 6 groups.
Can I just reflect back a couple of observations from the group? I think structure has a big part to play in all of this, and I think we had a lot of different structures. People were working in very different kind of setups, and the scale and the size of that and the format actually has a big part to play in how you deliver some of this, who you're working with, who the collaborations are, where your emphasis is. So services that are kind of very much council orientated with direct delivery of services or multiple services, or whether you're at the heart of the organization. The different place where you sit has a big impact on how you carry out those functions, whether or not you're a generalist or whether or not you have got a very specific role, and how big that team is. And it was just interesting to see that, actually, in terms of the way in which you incorporate those roles, particularly which Redbridge has. There's a lot to kind of reflect on in there in terms of how you set out in context what you do. Not sure if that made any sense, but there you go.
No, that's really cool. So if I was to reflect back, then ensuring that you almost have those structured moments so you can embed the practice. Like that.
I think you've got your macro structure and how you kind of organize, as an organization, and then thinking about how as a team you kind of fit into that model, whether or not it's a outward looking organization looking towards the community, or an inward organization or inward setup looking towards services and how they're delivered. I think there's some different ways of looking at it in terms of the context that you're in.
Great, thank you. Next group. Do we have Redbridge people who are representing who could feedback?
I can feedback from our group if that's helpful. There's a strange middle person to the both. So Angie was sharing with us sort of her feeling about doing this in an organisation where the rest of the organisation stays hierarchical. So, and that is our experience. We generally work with small pilots, and they're small teams of people that are still in a very hierarchical organisation, and how that can be a real challenge, but how it's also a wonderful opportunity to start to spread those roots, and how it, whilst it's a challenge, you can start to see the benefits of sharing that across the wider community, which I can see from Nita and Sharia talking to us about it as well. And we were also talking about the sort of the sharing of the roles, certainly in terms of like chairs of meetings, and how some of that needs to be reframed. We talk about a chair in a hierarchical organisation as somebody who's there making the decisions, holding the hard line, making sure the conversation is staying on track in a very particular way. But a chair in a self-managing team is there to make sure everybody's voice is equal and everybody's heard and everybody has an opportunity to speak. And the chair's role is to identify who needs to speak next, keeping everyone on track at the same time. So some reframing of roles that aren't the same, even though they're called the same thing in the different types of organisation. There may be other people that want to add from our group, but that was a couple of things from me.
I think there's something for me about the language that's being used as well. So in that reframing, is it possible to think about different words? Do you chair or do you host? Are you a steward? Are you a manager? Those kind of, how can you think about the labels that we're using in a way that opens up opportunities for doing things in a different way? Anyone else who wants to share back from that session? I'm aware that there must be some groups who haven't been represented. In which case I'm going to move us on. I'm never very good with silence, I have to say. I find it very uncomfortable, but I have to cope with that. We've actually got another 10 minutes. So what I wanted to do was just to reiterate that this is a group that we're trying to build and provide opportunities, particularly for local government officers, but also those who are kind of local government adjacent, to kind of come together, share learning, support each other, and also to try and build what we like to think of as a movement for change. And so we will be hosting another series, another set of these conversations over the rest of the year. So please do sign up to our newsletter and stay in touch so that you can kind of be aware of what's going on. So that's the kind of promotional bit for the learning community. The next thing to do, I suppose, is to say thank you to Ed, Paul and the team from Redbridge. I found it really illuminating. I think there is an opportunity to ask more questions if you want to do that. If anyone's got a kind of burning sort of clarifying question you want to ask. Ed's got his hand up. I don't know if that's for a question. That's probably not. Yeah, this is the last 5 minutes. So ask questions if you want to. Other than that, I'd ask you to check out. And so if you could put in the chat one thing that you're leaving with, like what is it you might be taking away from this session. And while you're all filling the chat with those, then I'll invite Wendy and then Ed to ask or comment.
Oh, thanks. Sorry, I think Ed was first, but I'm going to jump in. So yeah, I just had a question around, I was wondering whether they're within the Community Hubs teams and Redbridge, whether everybody's actually on the same pay scale or are people on different pay scales, and how does that work out in terms of power if there are differentials? I'm guessing obviously nobody's managing anybody else, but does it have an impact?
I'm happy to comment, but I'd be grateful for any other team members to comment or contradict what I'd say. So firstly, no, people are not on the same pay scales. So unlike many, I think, of the sort of Bjertorg and Bjertorg inspired approaches where there is that consistency, very different roles, very different in the sort of traditional sense levels of hierarchy. How does that work? I think it'd be good to hear from others. My sense is that I try to be honest about the fact that in a self-managing team, there are certain responsibilities that in a traditional hierarchy, people are being paid for owning those responsibilities. And so I suppose being honest about that, trying to make sure that those are kind of shared out in an equitable way. And I suppose that those responsibilities don't remove responsibility from, for example, myself. For things that I am responsible for feels really important. But it is something we talked about quite early on, that taking a self-managing approach will mean that at some point you may feel, actually, why am I doing this if I shouldn't be doing it? I think that was why developing the approach collectively was really important. So yeah, that's my reflection. Good to hear someone else in the team on that as well.
I think we might have to give the last word to Ed.
We don't have to. I'm more comfortable with silence than you, Jenny. So I'm going to wait for like 10 seconds. I'd love any other colleague to come in before I give my 2 pence if they have anything they'd like to share.
I'm happy to. Yeah. I'm only happy to because I was going to say I'm probably on with other colleagues on the lower pay scale than Paul and my managers, and there is this question about why should we take, like initially there was this question about why should we take on more responsibilities, and how like, yeah, what's the benefit in that? But actually it turns out that it's really about ownership and what you can say no and yes. Like you don't have to go for all those different roles, or there's boundaries that you can set yourself, and it's what you want to do or what you want to learn. So I guess in a way it was trying to understand that. Trying to understand, okay, where are my expertise? So I started as a community organizer, and I loved engagement. So I knew that what I could do well in engagement. But actually, by being able to take on more, I could do more project management. And that's how I evolved. And now I've taken a secondment in the project management team. So I guess it depends on the individuals, but it works both ways.
Fantastic. Thank you for that insight. We are coming to a close, but Shazi.
Just quickly, so Ed does have a moment to say his piece. Yeah, I suppose building on what Chiara mentioned, thinking about it with regards to sort of development. So while kind of may not kind of pay more to take on a role. If you think actually that's an area I would like to, as Ciara said, either move into or kind of upskill in, or kind of have an opportunity to sort of build my experience in something, is being able to kind of access those opportunities. So while it might not, you know, pay out to you, it actually might help you take that next step a lot quicker than you might do in a traditional hierarchy, where you might think, oh, I could never be a manager because I've never chaired a team, or I've never kind of led an action learning set. So yeah, just changing our thinking a little bit more towards learning and development. And because learning was always so key to the Community Hubs team, we were probably more likely to take that on.
Brilliant. I'm going to jump in now just because I want to, this is well, my last week in local authority world, my last day on Friday, and I'm moving back to the social sector that has been almost all of my career. And I suppose, well, firstly, by way of saying thank you to Jenny for hosting this session, I suppose I want to observe that this space is very reflective and has been reflective. I was sort of invited to be one of the co-conveners of this network, and over the past couple of years I've had some incredible interactions and connections, learned a lot from other colleagues, and you know, that nature of the reflective practice that we've done within our team is very much what I've experienced here. And to my limited experience of the world of local authorities, this feels like the best, most productive, energized and innovative space to be in, whether it's with other colleagues from other local authorities or within our own organizations. And there's so much opportunity and energy and ideas in what I've experienced in these kind of conversations. So thank you to Jenny and team for hosting it, and I really hope that others on this call can support them to continue this initiative. But also thank you to all of you for taking the time and having the initiative to join this conversation, and no doubt taking that same initiative and energy into your day-to-day. From what I've seen, it makes a massive difference and is part of what will make local authorities the best that it can be in the years to come. So thank you very much.
Brilliant. Brilliant timing as well, 1:59. So thank you for all of that. Thank you all for joining us, and I reiterate what Ed said, but yes, we'll draw it to a close now, and hope to see you again at a subsequent event. Thank you.
Thanks all.
Bye.